So why genetic engineering and GM? Well, geneticists look for problems to use the genetic engineering for. Like whenever we have a technology, we look for things, how we can apply the technology in the real world. And of course then they found like herbicide tolerance. So then you can spray, as a farmer, you can spray a crop but with the herbicide, but the crop doesn't die, only the weeds die. And that was then with all the statements, oh, like we can do it with Roundup and that's a benign herbicide, it doesn't kill and it's so good, it's a safe herbicide. And they also made insect resistance to use less pesticides. And that's like with cotton. And of course in cotton it works, like it's 80% less pesticide use. But, like what I said 10 years ago as well as a scientist, I asked questions, I said, if you use that BT, the insect resistance, then over time you will get resistance. Because the natural process of genes is adaptation. So if you attack something all the time, then there will be survivors that try to negate that negative. So we will get the insects that now eat the cotton, they will become resistant to it. But also, because we kill the insects that normally eat the cotton, we will then now get to see insects appearing that were not there before, but they have all that food there and no competition, so they will start to eat the cotton. And like 2 years ago, when I was at the cotton field day, well, for talking about biology, biological farming, I had farmers coming to me and saying about the BT cotton. They said, Maarten, this year we had insects on our cotton that were never there before, and we had to kill them. So we bought a drum of chemical that did that from Mr. Monsanto, and it was the most expensive chemical on the shelf. So we paid $50 a hectare to kill that bug. So all these things in nature, all the natural systems are always happening. But companies are not concerned with that, because companies know you always have to come back to them to buy the ways to get rid of the negatives. And that's why it's an unfair game. And then all the promises, like higher yields, better returns to farmers, it's all nonsense, because the higher yield, like I explained before, comes from backcrossing to the current varieties. And they just stack the GM in the higher yield varieties to be able to, that you have to buy those higher yield varieties to buy that GM, because you want higher yields. And like in the United States, there's hardly any, because governments, and in Australia as well of course, there's less and less in the world, less and less government money going into breeding of food varieties. That's all based on companies, and companies see a big buck in GM. So like with soybean and maize, etc., the dominant breeding is now all with GM. So you don't get the latest varieties with non-GM high yielding, because nobody puts money in there, because you get more money back if you put the GM in there. So in the farming community, you're always at the receiving end, because they take advantage of you, because the only place you can buy a high yielding variety is from them with the GM, so you can't get other ways. Only if you then start to go from your own seed sources again, in your own districts, you start breeding programs for yourself. And in India, they are doing that back, and because I was in India 2 years ago, in Andhra Pradesh, in the east coast, where the BT cotton was not working, and on the internet, all the pro-GM people said, oh no, it's all nonsense, people don't know what they talk about, it's all working. So I went on a fact-finding mission myself, and then I saw that it was true, and it was like other insects that were attacking the cotton that were not killed by the BT insect killer that was bred in as a GM. And then I went to villages in India that went back to the pre-Green Revolution farming, because their soil had become concrete and they had to use more and more chemicals and fertilizers to get the same yield. So they went back to the farming of their parents or grandparents, because they didn't have the money to buy bigger horsepower, like a bigger tractor to go to the hard soil. So all these things, like that we use GM as a solution, it's not a solution of a problem, it's just a symptom that we try to get high yields. So, yeah, so also like more growth for less water and fertilizer. Every time that you see in the articles in the Weekly Times and statements about, oh, we get better water use efficiency and drought tolerance and all that stuff. It's not true. And also using less nitrogen, all that daydreaming they do, that they can make a plant that uses less nitrogen, because it hasn't been discovered at all. It's just all talk, and they're searching for it. And they made those promises already 20, 30 years ago, and they're still making them. And the only ones that came out was the herbicide tolerance and insect resistance. Nothing with drought, acidity, salinity tolerance. And then if we go back to the farming with biological organic principles, if we take the soil biology as the driver, we can get all that salinity tolerance, acidity tolerance, drought tolerance back from the natural systems. But nobody can make a buck from those natural systems. You can't patent them, etc. And that's how companies work. And also like the more nutritious food and nutraceuticals. And the pharma crops, like crops for medicinal purposes. And that was like a story in the Age earlier this year or late last year, where one guy on the front page talked about all this stuff with, and like lettuce with some medicinal thing as well. And I wrote then a letter to the editor saying, well, if you see a lettuce or you see a carrot which has that medicinal thing in there, how do you know that that stuff is in there? Because if we eat a medicinal carrot as a normal carrot, we will get sick, wouldn't we? So how do you make them blue carrots, or how do you distinguish it? But that's all this short chain thinking that those scientists do. And like better for the environment, better for human health, do we feed the world? No, it's all negative. So the push for genetic engineering